Hello there. It's your girl Valerie Mason Chase again, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Marriage Beyond the Breach. And as always, we have a fantastic topic to discuss tonight. And we have an amazing guest on with us, one who's been here with us before. I have just been so incredibly blessed to have been able to connect with and get to know such amazing presenters. Some were my professors when I was in graduate school. Some are my colleagues after graduate school once I started practicing. But in any event, we are in for a real treat tonight. And what are we going to be talking about? Our topic is rekindle or release. How to navigate second chances in a relationship. And we're going to get right into that. But before we do, I just want to ask anyone who watches now or later, I encourage you and I appreciate to subscribe, like, share, all that good stuff that people do on social media. So without further ado, I am going to bring on our amazing guest tonight, none other than Dr. Ashlyn Jones. Hey, Dr. Jones.
Hello, Valerie. How are you?
Doing well, and I want to thank you for being here with us tonight again. You've been here with us before, but for those who may not be familiar with you, just share something about yourself.
Sure. My name is Dr. Ashlyn Jones. I have a private practice that I've been running for about 10 years. I met Val in a graduate program that I taught for for a number of years first, and then we've become colleagues and friends, and I'm so excited to be here to talk to you guys tonight. I have been married for over 10 years, and I have two small children. And as I was thinking about this topic and thinking back to cases I've done, I've just thought through so many people that I've really helped to navigate this question, rekindle or release, and just appreciating the depth that there is to this topic and the sensitivity there is to this topic. So I thank you for providing the space to talk about it, Val.
Yes, it is a kind of sensitive topic, and it's a very personal one, and one that undoubtedly some of the viewers have experienced. And I just want to say, even though our platform is Marriage Beyond the Breach, and we talk about relationships a lot, the topics that we discuss, it's not just for individuals who are currently in a relationship. It could be someone who's previously been in a relationship, wanting to be in another one. For those who know someone who's in a relationship, because sometimes our friends and family come to us, and we may be a confidant for them. And I think it's always helpful, if we are going to be someone's confidant, to come from a place with some sort of information or knowledge base. So what we talk about is not just for those who are currently in a relationship. Hey, Candy, thank you for watching. I appreciate that. So, Dr. Jones, we're going to get right into this. There could be any number of reasons why someone may need a second chance, but what, from your perspective, are some common situations where one partner may need and the other might consider giving a second chance?
Yeah, I think we realistically, if we're in relationships, we're giving a lot of chances. So when immediately what comes to mind when we hear, should I give this person a second chance? We're probably thinking about bigger offenses, right? Bigger ruptures of trust, whether that's infidelity, a breach of trust, addiction, a betrayal in a variety of forms. So that's usually what, like when we're at a decision point where somebody is asking for a second chance. In reality, again, we've probably given multiple chances, but it really is okay. We either repair this rupture, or we can't repair this rupture. And it's in those really weight-bearing offenses that usually I think we're thinking of when we're thinking about second chances. And there's a lot of different things. I think, there's a lot of different relationships, like you were saying before, that navigate second chances, friendships, who really have no commitment outside of the one that they make to each other. Some family relationships too that I think really wrestle with this area. I know in my life I have, but I think what I'll primarily be talking about today is kind of thinking about the primary, a relationship between a husband and a wife, or two partners, and in a romantic, committed type of relationship. When I'm thinking about how to think about second chances, but in reality, this is this really sensitive topic. I think all of us face at one time or another in a relationship that we really care about is, how do we rebuild past this point where there's something that's really hurt or damaged the integrity of the relationship? And so, but usually again, in those committed relationships, we're really probably talking about like ruptures of trust.
I like that phrase that you use, a big rupture of trust. And as you said, not just romantic relationships, because friendships can have a rupture of trust, and certainly family relationships can have those ruptures as well. But I like that phrase. I wrote it down. I'm going to be using that again. Big ruptures of trust. So, we hear a lot about red flags in relationships, kind of a stop, so to speak, and to reconsider. But from your perspective, what are some possible green flags that might indicate that someone is deserving of a second chance, or maybe even a third or fourth chance?
I think, like I said, I have kind of two ways of thinking about this, because I think instead of maybe using the word deserving a second chance, I really start to think about, like, are actually both partners ready for what it takes to engage in a second chance? Because this isn't, some of what we think about is like, there's the person that did the wrong and the wronged, and the wronged, party has to make a choice. And I think about like whether this person is this person really sorry? Is this person really going to change? Is this person, going to keep their promises? Especially if they haven't. But I really, there's really two parts of this, is that the person that's been wronged also has to be really ready to engage a second chance in certain ways, just as much as, we need to assess, is the person apologizing or asking for the second chance really desiring to change. So I want to kind of address both parts, because I think both parts are just really equally important. And probably what I would say here is that this, like, I would really just slow everything down around the question, because you both have to live this answer, and living the answer might bring things up that initially you might have been both really on board with a second chance, but living out a second chance just might bring things up you hadn't really anticipated or known. And so to initially rush to like, yes, I'm giving you a second chance, it's like, that might be actually kind of easy in one way. I don't want this to end, might be like just a gut response. That's the most easy instinctual answer. But really we're living this second chance out, and that brings up a lot of things. But I think something initially to look for if somebody is asking for a second chance is a genuine sadness and a connection to what the wrong was. And so, and again, I think that part of this is lived out, because sometimes what we see once we've given something time is people maybe coming from just like they were really afraid of the consequence, or they're sad about what the consequence will do to them, and they're not really genuinely connecting to the hurt that they've caused, or what the rupture of trust really has caused the other person. And sometimes what time tells is they really can't connect to it, or they really resist connecting to it for a number of reasons. So I think slowing it down and kind of seeing over time, this person really understands, and this does take time, I think, they really understand how this impacted the other person. And they really understand how it impacted them. Many ruptures of trust are really, they don't impact one way.
Right.
I think about this, a lot because I work with many representations of this. But if we're thinking about an affair, particularly, or a series of affairs, for a person to really connect to the impact, they really have to also connect to really layers of self-deceit. They've cultivated a life for, over time, and over, when you trace it back, actually decisions and choices that seem pretty innocent. And so it's like a really long kind of, I think, grief journey, to really untangle some of the things that are happening in our head and our hearts when we're really, because all of that, when you're in a loving partnership, like, you're really choosing a lot of small disconnections before you have a big disconnection. And so to really connect to that is, I think, there's two grief processes, I think, that really have to go on. And so not just what it caused, but also what kind of the hardening of your heart, or the self-deceit and disconnection that happened over time. And so if somebody is able to really to do that initially and really grieve one, like, their own, how did I get here, and how did I get us here? I think that's a green flag in a way, to look for, and again, requires a little bit of time, because initially sometimes that can be deceiving, it can be part of just deceit. It's really this, I don't want consequences, and that will bear itself out over time. And I'll say a little bit more about that. I would say, like, appropriate responsibility taking would be another green flag, and a willingness to take responsibility for their choices, and for any of the ruptures of trust that I've kind of thought through. It's like, what would this look like to kind of be able to trace back? So I guess a green flag would be some self-insight. Now, self-insight can be weaponized too, where if I can, this is defensive, and I've seen this play out. If I can tell you a story of how this happened, and it makes sense to you, it doesn't actually mean humility or repentance, or, it means, like, it's kind of being used in a defensive way. Well, if you understood all these parts, you would understand how I got here, and you would, there would be a lessening of consequences. And I think that's not, I think there's real responsibility that that kind of happens over time, because I'll use an affair kind of, because it's the easiest example. An affair requires a lot of, again, what I said, kind of self-deceit or hardening of the heart or disconnection. And so if you've been discovered in an affair versus confessed, like, your heart's kind of not ready to be exposed. So all of a sudden this veil is ripped out and you're exposed, but you didn't come to that because of a natural end in some way of, like, oh, this is not what I thought it would be. There's grief here. I'm connecting back to consequences and connecting back to reality in some way versus fantasy. So if that gets ripped out, that just takes a little bit of time to, like, get your heart to a place of, like, this wasn't what I wanted. This wasn't good for me. This wasn't good for my marriage. This was, and so I think, again, it's kind of being like, if somebody's revealed in that, like, I wouldn't expect their heart in that moment to be really very much changed yet. It has to kind of engage in a process of sifting and connecting, and again, their own grief process of, like, what's kind of happened, what's built this in my heart, in my life, and while I'm kind of also tending to my partner who it's hurt, or my family who it's hurt. So I think of those things. It's like, really, a few more would be, like, a lot of patience. Again, because I think this takes time. I think there's a lot of patience. Even this isn't over very soon. And I would kind of dispel that if I was a counselor working in this situation. Like, don't expect this to be a short process of,
Mhm.
reconnecting. And so when people start to protest, well, I already said sorry for that. If I already, if they bring a lot of defense really early, I would say that would be a red flag, because you've shown me the limits of your capacity to actually hold my
Mhm.
my grief process in this. And so, or the ability to, like, this is complex. And so I don't think the partner this is part of a different question, but I don't think the partner only has each other to process this stuff with. I don't think that's healthy. I think they do need a lot of confidants, as you were saying,
Mhm.
because it's just, you will meet each other's limits. Like, the offended can't hold your complicated process about untangling from the other relationship. Like, it's not meant to. It can't do it. You need
Right.
somebody to help you
Right.
do that. And so,
Mhm.
but I think it's like,
Mhm.
when somebody just demonstrates patience, like, this will probably come up in one form or another, the rest of our lives. This is kind of a relationship defining event. And I don't
Yeah.
want it to be used in an unhealthy way. It can be used to punish or shame. But certainly grief around it will pop up. Insecurity will pop up.
Mhm.
It'll become
Mhm.
a living force kind of in the relationship. And so there's just patience around that. So when someone's saying, like, we already talked about this, or like, you promised to give me a second chance, I would say, yeah, it's not quite fair. Or realistic, I think, in what the process is. Like, again, the grief process for both partners who are
Yeah.
through this.
Yeah. And that, wow. Everything that you said, I don't think can be overstated, because it is a process for both partners. Because sometimes, using affair as an example, so much of the focus, and in the beginning, maybe rightfully so, is on the um, the person who has been offended, the
Mhm.
betrayed partner. But the offender also is going through their own process.
Mhm. Yeah.
And it's one thing you said that's interesting. You said that going through this process, that sometimes things come up.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if one of those things can be if one partner or the other has had some traumatic experiences in their past, and how that may influence their decision to stay or not stay. And how might they recognize if they are being influenced by past trauma?
Mhm. Mhm. Well, because a rupture of what we're talking about is such a, like, I thought immediately of attachment, because
Mm-hmm.
trauma,
Mm-hmm.
lives and breathes and plays out in attachment, and this is an attachment relationship. When there's a significant rupture, there's the
Yeah.
attachment reaction is going to be pretty immediate,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was thinking about the attachment styles, like, what would they be and how could that play into, like, again, you're going to feel them pretty immediately. So
Mm-hmm.
if the person that was betrayed felt very securely attached to their partner, that the shock of the rupture is actually going to be so
Mm-hmm.
much more profound.
Yeah.
So that's going to be something that's going to define uh,
Mm-hmm.
part of how can I regain trust? Because if I had it in a way that to me felt so secure, and then, like, this is the capacity to which I can be wrong or surprised or let down, that's going to be again a
Mm-hmm.
pretty profound breach to move through, um,
Yeah.
and probably the most profound. So, but I think that might define if a person is like, just because of the shock of it, like, their whole world gets shattered. And their whole world gets, this isn't somebody that they, ever doubted. And so
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
could play out in secure attachment, and it could play out in other attachment as well. I think when I thought about anxious attachment, I think people, and I'll generalize for these, but I think people with anxious attachment style tend to move too quickly to immediately, yes, we're working through it, like whatever, like the second chance, I'm just happy to get it. I'm terrified of this, aloneness. I don't want you to leave. And so they'll move really, they won't slow down, it'll be like,
Yeah.
they said, sorry, we're like, I'm just so, that's all I want, that's all I want. And they don't evaluate maybe the character of their partner, or some of those green flags are not waiting on them. For people that hold, sometimes I'll talk about Christian kind of beliefs and some of that, because that plays into this conversation. But they might quickly move to like a value of spirituality and a value of beliefs. It's like, well, I can't and I won't, and they ask for grace, so I'm giving them that, and so they'll move kind of, maybe they'll jump at the chance to be reconnected. So with avoidant attachment style playing out, you might actually notice that they'll cut off. They'll be like, release, like, you hurt me, I'm not giving you another. So they'll move quickly on the other direction of not, moving too quickly to yes, but maybe moving too quickly to no. That nope, like, we're done, and I'm out.
Right.
And, you
no looking back.
Yeah, no looking back. No try again. No evaluation. Right. And I think that's what the heart of this is. It's like evaluation of a lot of different pieces of data that are often, and we like so much empathy to people that are in these positions, because such strong conflicting things happen all at once. It's like the shock and hurt, the longing to protect the family, there's just so much powerful stuff that gets stirred up, and that have, to leave is a bad answer, to stay is a bad answer. Like, so there's just so much conflict, I think, and that's why I think it's very sensitive. So I think slowing down to, like, again, attachment behavior is going to be pretty immediate, because it's like the framework in which we respond. And so I think it's evaluating that. What do I already know? What do I want to guide this choice? And again, I think slowing things down and thinking really flexibly about it. You need data over time really to make the choice. I don't know if you can make, a yes or a no.
Right.
And so I think that's part of, like, data from yourself, data from the other. Like, are they able to keep their promises? Are they able to really engage in the healing process? And again, I think that's a slow, we live out that answer over time.
Yeah, because you definitely will not be able to determine that immediately in the beginning. You just can't. We may be hopeful, we may want to think the best of our partner and the relationship, but we really don't know until, just like you said, we live it out and time has passed, and we have to watch and see and make evaluations along the way. And anyone who's watching, if you have any questions, or if you want to contribute a comment or whatever, and thank you, Elder Gail, I see you. Thank you for watching. I appreciate that. So if you have a question, just put it in the chat. Okay, because I welcome your input, and I like for these broadcasts to be as interactive as possible. So, Dr. Jones, you talked about how attachment plays a part and how it shows up immediately, because, all of our relationships come from that framework of attachment. So how can someone possibly tell if they're giving a second chance or considering giving a second chance out of a genuine hope or a fear of being alone?
So I think I wouldn't immediately rule out the strong presence of both, and how powerful that is. And so I think that's something that, if over time you see that, like, your fear of being alone drove you to like hit the accelerator and no questions were asked and you didn't look for the green flags, like I think then that's a warning sign. I think the presence of this, like I did not plan for this rupture, and now I have to make a decision about this rupture. And part of that will mean you look down the path of potentially walking away. And that I imagine would be really fearful, right? This wasn't, especially for the person that's like kind of wrapping their head around the betrayal. It's like, this wasn't part of the plan. Like this wasn't, I planned on being together, that's why we had kids, or that's why we made this decision, or that, and so it's, I think, a really natural part that's going to come up really strongly in the beginning. And it also might be survival based, I cannot make it on my own. And so that's going to come up really powerfully. So I would say like that isn't, it's also true that I've seen that be with working with people, the core, like it is the core of these decisions, and they're kind of knowingly more and more engaging with, excuses or justification, and not real repentance, not real change, not real engagement. And they're making a really conscious choice. Like after a while, it becomes really conscious of like, I would rather not be alone and deal with this, like the devil I know, than
right.
But truly, I've worked with other people that have walked enough down that road, and they're like, it is worse to be in a relationship that's designed to meet a need and doesn't. It feels worse to be lonely in this relationship than it does to be alone. And so
say that again. I want you to say that part again. Say that part again.
Other people have come to the realization that it is worse to be lonely in a relationship than to be actually alone. Because relationships are, especially the romantic, especially the partnership, especially the marriage, they're meant to meet needs. They're vulnerable because of that. Like we are vulnerable to the other person because they represent the person that is meant to meet our needs and some of our longings, and not all of them. But we're in this really powerful relationship, and it is, and I've seen this many, many times. It's so incredibly lonely to be in a relationship with somebody that is chronically deceitful or chronically, disconnected from you, or disengaging from your needs, or using you for one thing and then withholding themselves in another area. That becomes so profoundly dissonant. This isn't the way it's supposed to be. I'd rather be actually alone, and like that be the framework for loneliness, than to be alone in this relationship. And that, to like, when people get to that point, that's truly a sad point to be at, because that's so damaging. But it is like, some people, again, the other path of some people really are like, no, this is better than being alone. This is preferable to being alone. And I can deal with this set of issues, even though I know that they're issues, but I have a partner. I have somebody to go to the wedding with. I have somebody, that we share kids or grandkids with. Like that's something that they really make kind of a deal with themselves. And they kind of get to a point where I don't think they don't protest so much or ask so much for change. They kind of work on getting themselves like okay with what they've chosen.
Okay. Elder Gail asked the question, and I'm gonna get to that in a second, but you've used the words repentance a few times. So what does real repentance look like?
Repentance is a very laden word, probably within Christian communities, or religious communities would recognize that word. And so, part of the list, actually, and I'm happy to share this with you, part of the list of green flags came from an old handout I have of like, what is genuine repentance? And so what does it really mean to engage with what we did wrong, and what and how it looks to take responsibility and ownership of that. And so, and this, I'll frame it a little bit like this too, because for people in like a evangelical or religious or Christian community, there's often pressure for, like, grace is used, like you were given grace, you were forgiven, therefore you should forgive, you should give grace. And I would say that would be a potential red flag if the person asking for the second chance is using that value language really quickly and really strongly, or people around you kind of are doing that. Because something, and this ties into true repentance, what makes true repentance and grace transformative is we have a moment where it actually produces awe. Like, we are connected to that. We don't deserve it. So when there's and it's a gift given freely. And when we are really connecting to that, it's like we don't feel entitled. We feel like we're filled with wonder and awe, and like, who can forgive that? We're connected to a reality that's like, we're worshipful, we're stunned, we're so grateful, and it's an abuse of grace to be like, it'll get me. It's not real. It's not a real interaction or transformative interaction with grace to come to expect it. It does. If it's not producing an awe, then we're not connecting to our need for it in a certain way. So I think there's a sense when it's like, you're not a good Christian if you don't clean this slate. I would say, I don't think you understand what it really means to engage with my heart is pretty broken in there, and I need powerful help there, and so that language, that stance doesn't sound to me like, it sounds to me like, don't, like, no consequences, don't, that's not what a grace giver does. Like, no, that's not what a Christian does. And those get to be really powerful concepts that get played out, in these conversations all the time. And it can be really used. And I think, again, I would put that as a red flag in manipulative ways. And I'm like, I don't think what a real, like, a humility stance of like confronting a wrong and then receiving grace looks like. I would call it sometimes in my right mind. Like, it is such a different experience to really connect to that than it is to think I'm pretty good and I'm not that bad, and I should be given a pass for this or something. Like, you have a role to play too. So I think, again, like, genuine repentance is like, I don't deserve actually to be forgiven, but if you would, like, that, that's something that will powerfully connect to me. I would want to understand that. So I think, again, not like really genuinely wanting to make amends, really genuinely wanting to understand where it impacted the other person, and and being faithful to your own heart work, like knowing, like, okay, this is gonna, not trying to rush back. Sometimes, people that are in ministry are removed from ministry for a time, like, not trying to rush back into those positions, but really taking that time to, like, think and to sift and to really understand, again, like, how did I get here? Like, what? Because almost all, some people, I'll say that some people are chronic, they're kind of chronic offenders, and so they're very manipulative, they're emotionally abusive, they're not interested in change, and there's some really clear evidence we have that is how some people operate. Others, if they're engaging in an affair or engaging in layers of self-deceit, like, it's often connected to, like, their longings, it's often connected to things that they didn't even know or could identify or name, that another, this promise, this relationship answered something in themselves they didn't even know was operating so powerfully enough to, like, have them betray their own values. So I think it's just going to kind of, for people that aren't the chronic offenders, they really have some work to do to understand, like, what part of me how did I get here? And there's an answer to that,
Right.
and there's an answer within the
Mm-hmm.
relationship too of like, how did we get here?
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and to again, like to kind of sift through that. I think to me, someone willing to do that work is somebody that
Mm-hmm.
is trying to find better and better ways to kind of repent of what's in their heart. Like, help me flesh, like, I need this exposed. I need to understand this
Yeah.
because it led me to something that, active.
That is so true. And as you said, I think that's one of the things that has the potential to make couples work so challenging because, as you said, there are answers there and we
Mm-hmm.
can get to them, but it's hard work and it's
Mm-hmm.
very often excruciatingly painful work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the individuals involved have to be ready to do that because if not, you're just going to be dealing with surface stuff and not
Mm-hmm.
really getting to the root. And the root is what we need to excavate,
Mm-hmm.
destroy, and in
Yeah.
order to bring about healing.
Mm-hmm.
And not
Yeah.
everybody is ready for that. They think
And
they are.
yeah, and I think there's some respect I have for that. Therapy and therapy timing is everything. Like for some people, both parties are really interested in like putting the band-aid on the bullet wound and like figuring out how to be parents again, or figuring
Hmm.
out how to get through this. So there is a time. That's why I say like slow down. Like nothing, I don't think
Right.
healing happens immediately, and I really respect the people that do take the timing when it comes. Like I think there's just several cases of this that like a first or second round of therapy got them to a certain place, but they weren't ready for a variety
Hmm.
of reasons, or they both weren't invested in
Right.
that. And I think that so sometimes it's like really interesting that like there's can be this joint agreement of like or even maybe the offender wants to dig and the person that's been betrayed is I want to get past this. I don't want to think about that. That's when we'll be through it, and they're almost driving the acceleration.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah.
timing is everything, and there's a respect for that a deep respect that I bring to like readiness and like when that's not, like if it when it comes back up, will
Hmm.
you,
Oh,
and
and
it
it
will.
will. It
It will.
will.
Yeah. It sounds terrible, but it will. Like, and
It
that's
will.
okay. That's part of it. Like that in some ways, just like trauma, like any trauma, and this is a relationship
Hmm.
trauma, like any trauma, like, often when trauma comes back up or is like when there's some level of stability and you're actually ready to reprocess another part of it. And so when you're out of survival mode, certain things come back up. You're like, I need a break.
Yes.
But it's almost as like, okay, but you're ready to unpack this next part. You don't have to unpack it
Hmm.
all, but like, what's the next step and like where you're at to move you ahead, and to make
Yeah.
this healthier.
Yeah. Wow. And it always does come back up. People think, oh, you put something under the rug. Oh, I'm going to stuff this. Oh, I just want to get past it.
Hmm.
It doesn't last because it always
Hmm.
comes up. And it's a
Hmm.
good thing when it comes up because now you have an opportunity to work on those things that you
Hmm.
either were unable to or unwilling to before.
Hmm. And so I think too, like there's what I would so want is for somebody to normalize that, like, and normalize it, like, even in a couple years, your journey through this grief is going to look different. So
Hmm.
eventually it's not like a bleeding open wound, like, but
Yeah.
it's a scar and you see it and you're reminded of it and it jolts you, so there, and like, can you go back I so want people to feel like that's okay. Like, it is not the mark of something for it to never
That's
come up.
right.
Like, I just want to like wrap people up in that understanding of like, that does not mean you're back at the beginning. That doesn't mean you haven't done
Hmm.
anything. That doesn't mean this is terrible. Like that's okay. Like we all kind of have our loops and things resurface.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so I don't want people to feel like that's a failure. I think
Right.
that's my heart for them. It's like, that's not a failure. That's like any grief process. Like, you know, um, you like, I'm just not surprised by the stuff that comes up for me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, okay, you again, like, Oh, great. But it shouldn't be, it's like, we make ourselves like these strangers that like, that like, you should be past this by now. And like, I don't
Yeah.
think the way it works.
That's not the way it works at all. And you are
Mhm.
so right that that should be normalized,
Mhm.
so that people who are in the throes of it can have realistic expectations
Mhm.
of what lies ahead. I want to get to Elder Gale's
Mhm.
question. And Miss D, thank you for watching. I appreciate you. And I want to tie that into another question. She was asking, how do we know when enough is enough? And I want to just tag onto that. When might it be better to prioritize one's self care and individual healing rather than attempting to rebuild a broken relationship?
Mhm. Um, so I want that was another piece because I think I looked at that question. I'm like, if that's a question, it might mean it's time to leave. If those
Mm,
things can't be done together, it can't be
yes.
done. Um,
Say that again. Say that again.
so the let me go down to the question. So if you can't do self-care and healing individually as well as rebuild the relationship together, then it can't be
Mm-hmm.
done. It can't, like, so if it feels like a one or the other, then you're
Uh-huh.
going to choose probably to resuscitate the broken relationship and try to shuttle your feelings and complicated thoughts and nuances and
Mm,
fears and like into a box so they don't become so loud and annoying and bothersome and like interrupt this relationship. When I'm like, if they can't be both done together, they can't be done. And so to me, that's
yeah,
an
yeah.
indicator. Um, that feels like an
Mm-hmm.
indicator to me that if I'm choosing, then I'm probably going about the rebuilding of the relationship in a way that's going to have a lot of consequences on me. And I think a lot of those consequences are like depression. I think a lot of those
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
consequences
Mm-hmm.
are, this really like nurturing of like a shaming self-talk that like you shaming your emotions, shaming your needs, shaming the questions you have about the relationship instead of
Mm-hmm.
like, no, of course you're going to have questions about the relationship, of course you're going to have a lot of complicated feelings about the
Yeah.
relationship. And so when enough is enough is a highly individual question, because I think that could mean, like, for some people that means they've lived according to their values and given all that they can to the relationship, and they feel like if there was another trick to pull out of the box, I would do it. And if there's
Mm,
not, and it's not working, I can
yeah.
make a different choice. For some people that's like they really like have, and so but some people has like kind of this inexhaustible bag of tricks that it's like they'll always pull something else out to try or like diagnose
Yeah.
themselves with, so they can fix themselves and it's not so much this person. And so enough is enough is, again, it's like sometimes they really see it and they're like, I've been lied to. This person hasn't kept their promises. And if they haven't kept their promises multiple times, uh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
then I get to use that as data. Like, I get to use all this as data for for
Mm-hmm.
my choice around me. So sometimes it's related to the
Yeah.
other person, but sometimes enough is really related to the internal world of the person. Feeling like they're doling out second chances. And evaluating again their own reasons for doing that. Like, what are you getting from engaging in this, in the same way, like, and there always is something. So it's not a shaming question. There actually is an answer to that.
Right.
um, there is an answer to like what this gives me. Could be that security, could be that fear of loneliness, could be this picture of the whole family, could be like, I truly don't feel released to, from a belief set, from a value set.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
again, I think that like there's um there even, and again, I would say, like, even when there's really abuse in the situation, sometimes that doesn't feel like a just, like enough of a reason, which to me
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
actually speaks to probably what's more in the fabric of that relationship, which is like a long-standing emotional abuse where you don't feel like a person, or you don't feel like your reality has the substance. And so that makes it really hard to choose for yourself if you internally have learned to doubt your
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
personhood and learn to doubt like your reality.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. I'm thinking about what you just said, and that's key
Mhm.
about if you're having to choose between your own self care and healing, and working on healing the relationship, then that is not a good place to be in, and probably is a
Mhm.
sign that maybe the relationship is either gotta go, and you work on yourself. And I think
Mhm.
that's why when a couple comes in for counseling, especially when there has been some betrayal or some breach of trust, individual counseling, I think, is also really necessary, because
Mhm.
both partners, they're bringing their stuff into the relationship.
Mhm.
So couples counseling and individuals counseling as well, so that you can work on your self-care, on your individual healing, and
Yeah.
then process all the couple stuff in the couple sessions.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And because again, I think that there's just so many things that the partnership can't hold for you in that
Mm,
moment while you're rebuilding. And that's okay, because that's just what you're rebuilding. Like, something's been broken. So it can't hold the weight of all your grief and anger
right.
and, like, or you're like, the ways in which you kind of miss that second relationship. It can't and shouldn't hold that, so somebody
Mm-hmm,
else
mm-hmm.
really does need to help you sit that. I have seen people engage in kind of interesting behavior around that, where, like, they're almost afraid of individual counseling. They want to come to marriage counseling, but like to be alone, like in the therapy room, very daunting and fearful for them, for a lot of
Mm-hmm,
different
mm-hmm,
reasons. But
mm-hmm,
that
mm-hmm.
there's almost sometimes like a resistance of like, no, 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 we're just here for the marriage. And there can be some complexity in just even actually going into individual. But I do think that, whether, like, you need a good mentor, you need a challenging person in your life that's
Yeah,
like, this
yeah.
isn't, this is what this sounds like. You need somebody to hold up the mirror. Therapists aren't the only people that can do that. But that's part of often people's trainings. But if there is not individual therapy, that's something that I think you're missing. You're just missing an
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
opportunity, and maybe that'll come later. But I do
Okay.
think it's important. Yeah.
So, Elder Gail, thank you for your question. Anybody else you have a question, just put it in the chat. So, what are some steps that couples should consider taking if they decided to try again after betrayal, or if they've had some break in the relationship? And what role does setting healthy boundaries play in that?
Hmm. Um, I think of this as stages in some way of healing. So I think immediately, like, there's this kind of like your boundaries get, and this is a conversation, but like kind of firm and close. Like think about how to make somebody feel secure, like kind of wrapping them in a hug. Like, actually, for a little bit,
Mm,
like,
mm-hmm,
we're
mm-hmm.
gonna change some things about how we operate, and it's not gonna be forever. But
Right.
we do kind of need to huddle a bit, and I need to kind of know, like, restricting certain things, whether you're going off social media or you change your phone number. Like,
Mm,
things kind of get a little, I think, like the walls kind of get small at first, and really focused on each other. And then I think over time, you do want to see, that's
mm,
how trust grows back. You do want to see
mhm,
people
mhm.
be able to expand where boundaries. I think I've said this before here around boundaries. Like, boundaries aren't a wall; they're a door you can enter through. And so I think
Mhm.
you're really trying to find your way back to this person. You're not trying to shut them out. Ultimately, that won't be helpful in some ways. Like, maybe parts of your heart
Right.
have to do that for some time, but you really want to find a way back. What's the door back to each other? What is any
Mhm.
way, like, to find your way back to, like, and then build from that place of trust And so again, because we're such attachment beings, like you and I could have the same story of infidelity in our relationships, and we process them and make meaning of ourselves and our partners and the fact that it happened so very differently. And so there is that sense of like, wherever the wound is, for the other person, like that to me, that needs the tending. And so if you're a person that even hears that or is like a confidant, I think that's something to like, where did this land for you? Like, what's the thing? And I'll ask these questions sometimes of like, what's the thing that keeps playing in your head? And often they're really small. Like, I can't believe you shared this with them, or I can't believe, you said this while you did this. I know we became very fair focused. Again, there's a lot of other examples. But I think that's it. Healthy boundaries are supposed to be adjusted over time. The data you have, boundaries are small. As new data happens, like you should be able to see certain things expand, certain things like you don't need that barrier anymore to feel safe with your partner. And it should be kind of reevaluating over time.
Okay. Talk a bit about some situations where giving a second chance or third or whatever number chance might be harmful.
I think there is the risk, and I don't think there's always a way to perceive this, but there's a risk that you are going to be vulnerable and it happen again. There's a risk that as you live this out together, one of you will not be ready for the next step. And so you'll both kind of feel like, well, you promised, well, you said that, and so you're really engaging in a risky thing. All relationships are very risky, but then there's some known risks you're taking. So I think that is, and I've also seen like just, I've seen a lot of people navigate breaches of trust by like silencing parts of themselves, like, and shutting down parts of themselves. Like that's how they learn to navigate it, which I think is inherently harmful. And so, and also, there is the chance that like actually what this unveils is a manipulative pattern, that is not isn't a second, third kind of thing, but is actually part of like it's abusive, it's intended to do harm. And so that's what this, like engaging in this process might reveal to you. So there is a number of ways that I think even unintended consequences, we can't foresee all of them. But there is people that kind of even watch from afar and be like, well, they stayed, so I should stay, when they don't really know context or nuance or decision points. And they, and I think that's a form of harm, but like you can't control how somebody is making meaning of your experience. But I think, again, there's just so many ways in which this could probably play out. But I think that's what I see. It's like, people that are engaging kind of stop the healing process at one point and just shut down, and they don't then take the opportunities to re-engage. Maybe they needed a break from pain, right? Maybe they needed to mother or parent, father small children, and like there's certain things that have to go offline. Maybe that's the case, but when the opportunity comes, they don't re-engage with some of the things that have happened. Again, I think that's the part where I see harm done to mental health. I see harm done to the overall, like the relationship.
Okay. And speaking of those on the outside looking in, those sister girls, friends in the amen corner, or family members who don't necessarily approve of their friend or family member, their decision to give their partner a second chance. How do you deal with them?
Well, I think there's I've actually seen this kind of play out both ways. So I think there's a really healthy, like, if you like, let me know the level to which you can tolerate my choices,
Mm,
and stop there, because I am making this choice and it's in accordance to my values, it's in accordance to my hopes, and you may not agree, but
mhm,
like,
mhm.
kind of let me know how much of a support you can be while I engage this, while I
Yeah.
live this out. I think there's going to be a boundary there, in that, and often it comes from a lot of fear, and a lot of somebody
Mm,
sees something and sees manipulation. Like, I find, and this is what I would say to confidants, I find that people can't hang, and they're loving people, but they cannot hang in a complex process for too long. Like, they want,
yeah.
eventually they want black and white. They want,
Yeah.
like, get out, and so because they
Mhm.
get so
I get
tired of
tired of
being,
hearing about it sometimes.
yeah.
Yeah.
But like, hearing about it, but like, really, it's actually like, they can't tolerate you being hurt. And it's like,
Mm,
just fix it.
mhm.
Just stop. Like, and then it's like, so they really reach a level of like not being able to hold the complexity of what it means to live this out. And I think that's
Mhm.
like, if I would say, like, to be a really good confidant, get patient, and get understanding, and get like, what is my role and how can I be supportive? I'm not the person making this decision. And I would speak out against outright abuse, and I would always speak directly to that, because again, emotional abuse which is backbone of all abuse, is emotional abuse, is so manipulative, and it's so reality
Mhm.
bending. If I see that, I'm like, ooh, like, I go right for that. But there is also still like that, there is a timeliness to some of that. On the other side, I've seen people, like, this is kind of an arc that sometimes happens, is like, people are in like a marriage, let's say, and they have tolerated something, and then they, for so long, or over and over and over again, a certain pattern, um, and most of it, some of it, maybe people might know, but then the partner gets to a point of no return, where it's been
Mm.
so many years of living in this, that they get to a point of no return. And then the partner says, but I'm sorry, but I want to change. And then other people come in on their behalf saying, like, she's changed, he's changed. But like,
Mhm.
not recognizing, like, you're just joining something that's been part of this person's lived experience for so long. And so they're like, you have to give him a second chance if he wants one. And
Mhm.
they're
Mhm.
past the point of no return. And then some people get really punitive. They'll be like, well, we're not doing this and we're not doing that. And they actually really kind of remove support to be punitive for the decision that they make, not kind of
Mm.
recognizing, like, this is part of a whole thing that, like, you're
Mhm.
entering in chapter,
Mhm.
14 on. And so I think that I've seen kind of both parts play out.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. That is real good. So, Dr. Jones, any final words about our topic tonight and just how you would sum it all up?
Mm-hmm. Uh, the joke, it depends, comes up. Um, I do. I feel like even navigating it and talking through some of these points with you, Val, like, I even appreciate the complexity of it as I'm talking about. There is just so much.
Yeah.
And everyone who is a believer is the glad recipient of second, third, fourth chances, right?
Mhm.
Which also enters into my mind as something I'm really wanting to be mindful of, like, how to live that out, vertically as well as horizontally, like, in my relationships and in my relationship with God. But I think, again, like,
Mhm.
I think there is so much here that, like, all of us, friend, therapist, partner, like need to slow down and evaluate, like, what is going on, like, how am I making meaning of this, how am I thinking this through, how
Mhm.
am I
Mhm.
moving quickly to judgment or solution, and is there anything else to know or understand.
Yeah.
So this whole kind of, like, slow down this process, and like, there's so much here to understand about ourselves, even if we're watching something happen in another relationship, like, there's a lot to understand about where that is landing for us.
Mhm. Okay. Wow. And it is complex. There's a lot involved. There's a lot at stake when you have
Mhm.
a relationship, any romantic, friend, family, whatever, but in romantic relationships. And then you have to consider children that
Mm-hmm.
are part of that as well. So, yeah, it's very, very complex. And as you said, those two words, it depends.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Dr. Jones, I want to thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you, thank you,
Of
thank
course.
you. And just tell us a little bit about Jones and Luther Counseling.
Yes, of course. So me and my business partner run a counseling practice in Yardley, Pennsylvania, and we see people online and in person in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And we have a wonderful staff that I've gotten just a chance, one, to train in their graduate counseling journey, as well as their journey to professional licensure. And I just have so much deep respect for them and the work that they do. But it's been a really cool opportunity just to build and branch and provide services to the community. So yeah, it's been great. Thanks for inviting me on to talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, fantastic. So, any of you who are watching, or if you know someone in need of counseling in Pennsylvania or in New Jersey, there is the website. You can take it down. I don't know if you could screenshot it or whatever you might need to do. And I highly recommend Jones and Luther Counseling, Pennsylvania and New
Mhm.
Jersey. And thank you all for watching. Come back again next week. Our topic is going to be mature love, maintaining romance and long term relationships.
Mhm.
That's work. That's work, but it's worth it. So I want to thank you again. Thanks, Dr. Jones. Thank you for viewers, and I will see you all again on next Sunday at 7 p.m. Be blessed. Have a great week.
Mhm.